Hey Denise, today is our last running free.
Yeah, but we'll be back. And you know what? Today, I'm going to run 100 metres.
What?
Yeah, because we're going behind the scenes of that iconic TV series for Australia, The Games.
Just how long is our 100-metre track, Mr. Wilson?
That's the line, Esther, that's the line.
Welcome to this session of Running Free Skills. My name's Denise Eriksen and I'm from Media Mentors. The session today is kind of close to my heart because it's about the making of one of Australia's greatest, in my opinion, comedy series, The Games. And we'd like to, before we get underway, say thanks to ACMI for making all this happen. And thanks to the ABC and Beyond Productions for giving permission for us to use clips today. But mostly, this is actually a tribute to John Clarke. And he was a New Zealander, and you can't take that away from us. Joining me today are three people who were crucial to the production of The Games. Bruce Permezel, who was the show's director. Hello, Bruce.
Hello, Denise. Lovely to see you and the team.
And you, yes. Jenni Meaney, who was DOP and all sorts of other things on The Games. Hi, Jenni.
Hi all, great to be together again.
And Wayne Hyett in the real sort of engine room, the editor of The Games.
Oh, you mean where all the magic happens. Delighted to be here.
Lovely to see you all. Before we get underway, I should say that I produced and exec produced the first series of The Games, but the second series was produced by Mark Roos, and this is also a tribute to him. Let's get underway by talking about the origin of this idea. Bruce, you were particularly closely involved in this as well when we were working for Beyond Productions. Do you remember us going to see Waiting for Guffman?
Well, I do, Denise. That was about 23 years ago, but I remember it was fun. I can't remember the film that well. I mean, I love the series the director does, the mockumentary style of filmmaking. But I do remember it was lovely actually going out to the pictures with John in an afternoon. It was quite an experience.
And eating ice cream, I think.
I think it was the ice cream. So, I do remember that. And I remember the discussions that brought afterwards that sort of created a little bit of opened up the ideas of doing it as a mockumentary.
Yes, because it had been sitting with Channel 9 for a couple of years as a sort of more conventional series, comedy series. But after that doco, John was very much in sync with doing it as a mockumentary, wasn't he?
That's right. I think he saw the comedic options, and then also, that he could play with the form. He got very excited, that it allowed him to actually refer to television and the making of television, and he's always been, intrigued by that because he's always made his own television, very hands-on. So I think he found that rather delicious to be able to do that, poke fun, and especially be able to probably poke fun at the ABC a bit too.
Well, totally. And so the first step that we did, and we brought on our, documentary crew, really, because it sort of had to change from a conventional comedy. And so we had to sort of recruit our crews. Jenni, you came on board pretty early, didn't you?
I did, and my background was mainly in documentaries, so I had spent a couple of years on the drama crew, ABC Sydney, as a focus puller, so I understood the language of drama, but in terms of shooting, documentaries were my true love. And I think Bruce and I had already done a doco together at that stage. Yeah, it was before that. We'd done a series at the Children's Hospital, which was fantastic. And I guess that's where the connection started. And, Bruce was...
That's right. That was for Channel 7, in fact. That was with me.
Yes, that's right. And you, Denise. Sorry, yes. It's all coming back to you.
And Wayne, I'm going to come to you soon, but I'm going to talk a little bit firstly about shooting the pilot, which was at the MCG. And it was an absolutely... the pilot was actually depicted a completely shambolic office scene for the alleged Sydney Olympic Games.
Hello. Sorry, can you just hang on a minute, please? Hello? Sorry, can you just hang on? Excuse me, who are you people? Have you got permission to be in here? Who gave it to you? Look, you'll have to please keep well back. We've got bloody Juan Antonio Samaranch and a delegation from the IOC in here at 4 o'clock. You'll have to keep well away and you'll have to get out by then, yes? Excuse me. Excuse me. I won't keep you terribly long.
Bruce, what do you remember about that?
Well, looking back, I mean, some of that has appeared in I think that scene reappeared in episode 1 or 2. Yeah, we shot that at the MCG, looking back onto the in one of the meeting rooms, looking back onto the stadium. But it was originally, what I found interesting, and looking back again at that, it was shot for the internet. John had an idea. It wasn't the sole purpose. John had an idea because he'd had a friend who was heavily involved in just the emerging technology, the interweb.
That's right.
And he thought he could stream this. And so this was one of the first ideas for a web series. Hence it was like a 10-minute kind of piece. Very static because you couldn't move the camera much because compression and all that sort of thing played into those. So it was shot for that purpose, if I remember, as well as exploring the idea, just how the idea of a, sort of a mockumentary went. Not that we did much. It was a very simple approach. But, yeah, it was kind of exciting that was possibly one of the first web series.
Yeah, that's right, because he really was amazing like that. And I think, it also set up, it made us all realise, I think, and, feel free to chip in here, just how much of the games was already established in terms of the style, but the script, the relationship between the key actors.
Yeah, well, that's Gina and Brian, terrific key members of the team. Well, John knew them, obviously came in, did them. And the other thing that I know that pilot did influence was the background, and Jenny can talk to this probably a bit later, but John fell in love with the looming stadium behind and how that showed that that stadium had to be filled in a couple of years' time, and the pressure. So he fell in love with that. We tried to recreate that in our set.
Okay, so we took it to the ABC and they actually went, "You beauty." I'm not quite sure they quite understood what they were buying, but they went, yeah, and within weeks it was up. So we went ahead then and hired the doco crew to sort of take it forward. Wayne, you came on at the same time as part of the sort of doco approach. So let's talk a little bit about what you'd been doing until then and what you thought about being asked to be involved in a comedy drama.
I've done a lot of drama as well as documentary, and particularly observational documentary. So it was, it's a sort of, it's a form I love swinging between the drama and the documentary elements. There's sort of, there's great observational elements that come out of both. But what I was intrigued about this was kind of the free form and the brainstorming that was going on when I first got there between Bruce and Jenny about how they would approach it.
I think the series very much evolved, like Wayne said. It started off and John wrote it pretty much as a radio play. And you can really see that in the first, 2 or 3 episodes. And I mean, he loved radio play and he loved dialogue and he loved just words and the rhythm of words and the rhythm of the script.
Yeah.
So when we got scripts, there were no big print, how you get in big print in a drama that actually, gives you an idea of maybe where the scene could be set or the camera could do something or a point of view. None of that, which was great. But that was a challenge initially because where do we set these? And they're written as 10-minute, and Jenny could probably talk to this, 10-minute or 12-minute little individual episodes.
Yeah.
And that's how they played out, I think, in the first episode. And basically just dialogue. And then we had a lot of trouble initially. How do we film it? How do we break it up? How do we make it visually interesting? Because in a documentary, normally things are happening in front of you.
Yes, and it was that challenge. It was interesting from the editor's from my point of view. That was the one contribution or the one big challenge initially was to be, okay, take those 10-minute little pieces and find a B story and find out a way we can move between them and sort of so we can keep the audience engaged with other elements rather than, as John would sort of script and perform the 10-minute radio play, and then we'll work out a little bit later on where we're going to sort of put the other story in the middle of that. it sort of settled down, but it was tricky in the beginning, as you pointed out, Bruce.
I totally agree with everything you guys are saying, and it was a challenge, the original format of 2 more or less 10-minute pieces, because as Bruce and I would sit there kind of late on a Tuesday night before shooting on Wednesday trying to work out how we do it, we sort of suddenly realised that, but Gina left, but now she's actually in the office in the other script. And so there was all these sort of nuttiness that didn't help. And also we got very good at mining every possible location we could at the Moorabbin Town Hall, where we shot every stairwell, every walkway, just to keep things moving. So even, just lots of, we'll have them walking, we'll have them go down the car park, we'll have them moving here, just to break it up a little bit. So,
and also to give editing options later of, thank God we've got a cutaway, we've got a sequence we can go to.
But it was a fine line, because you didn't want to overplan it, I think right from the start, the performance and the jokes were front of centre, and the story that John was telling below those jokes, which was quite serious, really, what he was actually talking about. So there was both Bruce and I certainly wanted to just support that rather than interfere with it in any way. So just keeping the audience engaged and movement, but without, overwhelming the narrative kind of thing. So.
Yeah, it was a balance. Yeah. Look, I think we're going to consider some of the specifics now. And I think one of the things that was quite different and quite, fresh, but also incredibly challenging, was we decided that we wanted to be really topical at the head of each session. So we shot, and I'm going to play a clip as an example and just a tick, these really topical bits that we'd perhaps read about in the newspaper or whatever, and John had got, oh my God, we've got to talk about that at the beginning of the episode. This is an example of one actually from episode 4 from the series.
Yeah, well, the marketing's still a worry. We've got 115 authorised products in the shops, but they're just not moving. The mascots are doing well. They're selling like hotcakes, these things.
But isn't that good?
Well, yeah, it's good, but the market they're selling to is the bananas in pyjamas market. So basically they're selling to people who don't know what the Olympics are.
Yes, that is a concern. I think we might have to have a look at our product at some stage.
Far and away, the greatest response we've had from people buying tickets is for the swimming. Australia did very well in the swimming in Atlanta, of course.
It's hard to know. I mean, at the moment, logically, you would have to say that we're selling a lot of tickets to people who perhaps want to go to the previous Olympics, and a great amount of product to people who don't know what the Olympics are.
Yeah, for sure.
They're all funny.
That's so classic. And I remember I was up in Sydney, and I remember getting a phone call from the set saying, oh my God, are there any of those mascots available at Sydney Airport? And I went, yeah, there are. Okay, buy them. Oh, Wayne, what have you got there?
This is a perfect highlight. This is probably one of the very items that you would have hurriedly purchased at the airport and brought back. This is Sid the platypus, and one of the very important props that we had used throughout both series in order to keep it very Olympic when you weren't allowed to do anything Olympic.
No, that's right. We were so not. I also noticed how you filmed that. Like, I thought that was a really interesting framing of how you shot that. Would you say that was a style moment, or am I overplaying that?
Well, it's a nice shot, nice 3 contain. Jenny and I had a lot of discussions about the language of the camera, because we didn't want the mockumentary style to dominate. You see some series that did do that, when it all became trying to be a mockumentary, because you got to play to the comedy, to the joke, and the performance. And so Jenny and I spoke a lot about how would we film this if this was a real documentary. But yeah, we'd always sort of think, if you were filming a documentary, where would you like to film this? And often in documentaries you do set up shots like that, set up interviews, where they do look a bit more constructed. And that was probably one of them, I guess, Jen.
Now, there's one thing I wanted to talk to you all about, which we're going to play while we're talking about it, is the classic with Nicholas Bell being really unhappy about the crew filming this.
Oh, good morning.
Morning.
Morning. How are you?
I'm good. Look, I'm sorry, you people, do you mind giving me a few minutes? with John and Gina. You'll have to leave. I'm fine. I'll be with you in a minute, mate. How are you, Gina?
What's the matter?
Thank you.
What are you doing here?
I'll be with you in a sec.
Well, to start that off, I think that plays in the lovely documentary thing that happens in real documentaries is when people kind of leave their radio mics on.
Yeah.
And you can go away and film and you listen, and people have forgotten that. And that's, that happens quite often for real. And you can, depending on the circumstances, get great stuff. So I guess we were playing a bit on that. And I know we loved filming anything through windows or glass or dirty. It's called dirtying up the frame. It makes it feel like you're peeping in, a bit more exclusive, intimate access that you shouldn't have, which makes it feel a little bit more exciting. So I think we're sort of playing along to that. That clip keeps going. I don't know if you get a chance to play it, where John comes out and I remember...
Oh, we're about to play that. Okay, yeah.
But I just remember, so I'll just talk on that point.
Yeah, go on.
Because I sort of played the role of the documentary maker a little bit in the first series. Luckily, I was written out in the second series. But John came up to me, and I just remember how terrifying it was, because he played John Clarke being really annoyed. And he tells me off, and that when you get that look from John, man.
I've been watching you filming from in there, and I don't mind it because we might have a problem here, and I don't mind it being on record, but I want your understanding that is not going on television. Is that all right? I want your word as an Australian journalist that won't appear on television.
Okay, John, sure.
Good.
Yep.
This is hopeless.
That is such a beautiful scene by John where he says one thing and means another, which was just underlines what happens all the time in this series. It's beautifully crafted, and you can just tell by the mischievous look on his face that that's exactly what he means. It sort of gave everybody a lot of confidence in the early episodes when that would happen, that this is where you could go, it seemed, and everybody was really getting a little bit more sort of in tune, it seemed, at that time with the language that was coming from that. And Bruce is correct, without being too much in your face as a documentary style, it seemed to start to really settle down, that when possible, they would ignore the cameras, but then they'd use them to their best advantage when it was useful to have it recorded.
And also, I mean, a subplot of the series for me was also around his views on the media. And a lot of the times you did feel that he was entirely comfortable with the idea that the media could be manipulated to hell. And that was an underlying theme in the series, wasn't it?
Oh, indeed. John had a healthy scepticism and maybe even a slight dislike for parts of the media, but loved to delve and work within it to his advantage. And this was just a perfect platform, the games. And Bruce and Jenni had set up a whole scenario where he could interact. And I'm sure a bit of this, Bruce and Jen, I'm just trying to remember, it's a long time ago, that there was, as you mentioned earlier, there was no big print in the script. And so a lot of this must have been developed a bit on the fly. Was that correct?
Yes, it was. I think we sort of did there's a read-through, I think this is right, Jen, on a Tuesday.
On Tuesday, yeah.
And that afternoon, we'd sort of block out the key scenes.
We pretty much just let people, I always remember because people would say, what do you want me to do and where do you want me to sit? And we go, just whatever you feel comfortable with. And this is other people who came in, not the regular team, but and they're always a bit confused about it, and then they completely embraced it. And I think Denise very early on to me, when she first spoke to me about the series, I don't know whether you said it or I imagined it, said it's a bit like filming theatre, like just follow the action, which is very much a documentary thing. And so we tried to do that, to let people inhabit the space and see what happened and then plan around that in that way.
And one of the things too that comes out so often when you're watching clips is just that natural style of acting as well, which is playing into what you're talking about.
I think Brian used to say that he used to forget we're there sometimes, which would actually result in him standing right in front with his back in front of the camera sometimes. So we'd have to kind of just go, which was a great compliment actually, because that's what we were kind of aiming for in a way.
Denise, I think on that, a lot of the guest actors, all the guest actors came in and, as well as John and the key cast, played themselves. They always had their own name, Super. And that gave that gave them, I think, liberty just to play a version of themselves, and suddenly, that was interesting. They came on and relaxed a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, there was an incredibly tight schedule. I mean, what we achieved in that time, Bruce, I can see your eyes shutting, going with horror, the memories. But it was a really tight schedule, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. I'd never done anything like this before. This was all brand new to me. So we just went with it. I think out of that came a lot of excitement, and you just got to do it. I kind of liked the schedule. I think it was based on Annie Mather, who was our first AD. Fantastic. So she brought some drama experience. She had done Frontline and things like that. And I think the schedule was very much based on that. And it was a workable schedule, but, it was hard. We had to move, didn't we, Jen?
We did. We didn't stop moving. And I kind of liked it because it meant you couldn't overthink things, and we couldn't polish it up too much. We'd pretty much do 2 runs of things max. Sometimes we'd just do 1. It's very unlikely we'd go past 2. And I knew from a camera point of view, there's always things you'd want to do better, but I just went, that's not the point. Like, we always felt if the performance was there, that's it, regardless of what's in shot, what happens, and I kind of love the purity of that, actually. And it was very energizing. I mean, because of the mad, we had a pretty small crew, and we did lots in our time. It was fantastic.
How did that play out in the edit suite, Wayne?
It was interesting because you certainly needed to have the confidence, because often was the case, as Jenny said, that there was only one take, and it's often be a long piece. It was not often you were removing elements of the dialogue that was performed. But I remember that one of the great benefits of the way we set up with that was that we set up the edit suite literally about 2 rooms from where you were shooting it. Everybody could pop in at any stage, which they did.
Yes, it was so exciting, particularly Friday nights when I think it was Friday nights we'd finish shooting. We'd shoot Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we'd often be in the edit suite with a beer, seeing what, Wayne and John had conjured up, which was going to go to air in a week's time, and we'd be all falling about laughing, we thought it was fabulous, and that was so great. There was a brilliant team spirit. It was just, we all loved it to pieces. So that helped a lot, and it just informed moving forward, I think. And we did, as you say, get confidence that it was working, because it was a bit risky. I mean, shooting-wise, there was no cutaways. There's nowhere. We gave you nowhere to go, really. So it completely hung on the performance, and
it did. It was the collaboration. I've never worked on a show where it was so collaborative. Poor old Annie Mather, you mentioned, the first AD would be even in between takes, or with the studio being so close, she'd be trying to drag John out of the edit suite, who just loved seeing how things were going at any stage. And she'd be just going, oh no, here he is again. And John would just be sometimes almost hiding behind me so he could just watch it for a bit longer.
But of course, I mean, one of the things too that I found the most brilliant about the games, one of the biggest jokes, was that the show was shot in Melbourne, about the Sydney Olympics. Now, how glorious was that, guys?
Well, yeah, it was pretty delicious, and I don't think many people picked up on it, really. I think we pulled that one off. We were based down at Moorabbin at the City of Kingston Old Town Hall, or buildings, and like Jen said, we made every use of every little bit of it, car parks. I mean, it was great. And then built a set in there and had the Duratran, which is the big transparency of the background, and it was tremendous. And when we went outside, we'd go up and down North Road, because it kind of looked like Sydney.
And how did we go and get those Sydney shots that we were so proud of? Like, there was some glorious stuff at Sydney Airport that we
got some people up there. I think I went up there to shoot some, atmospheric shots of the Sydney Harbour Bridge and chaos of construction, and you put that in, and I know Wayne nearly ran out of them, but
I did run out of them, actually, yes. But it was interesting that they fortunately grabbed because we did a lot of the exterior sort of dialogue, keeping it on the move theme in the car, that we were able to intercut that with some strategically shot places of things shot out of a car window, actually in Sydney. So it's a pretty basic technique, but, you join those two elements, and if it's done kind of well enough, everyone will believe it. Of course, it's Sydney. I remember there was a scene where they were heading off to the airport, and Bruce had shot a couple of shots out the window of coming through into Mascot Airport, sweeping past the sign, and we just intercut that with turning in a corner in the car down North Road in Melbourne, and it worked beautifully. You'd never know, you know. So it was lots of interesting stuff that kept the illusion alive, really. It was great.
I think also the fact that it was, the landscape of the time was that committee was setting up to run the Olympics. So it was in the paper every day, and it was very much in people's mind that this huge event was coming to Sydney. So, you know, in that context, for this to be happening, that the topicality of it happening every week, and, you know, as Denise said, we sort of keyed in little very topical things that just happened a couple of days before. People were completely enamoured with it and completely believed the story, you know, and it was sort of smoke and mirrors. You know?
And by the time we rebadged a few taxis and things like that with some New South Wales brands and number plates and those key elements, you just had to be mindful of a bit of detail, but you got away with a lot. And one of the big challenges, Denise, of course, was what you would have had, and it was to make it, stamp it looking Olympic without ever using anything that remotely resembled Olympic, because that's sort of just a place you don't want to go.
That's right. I mean, it was a killer. We knew, you know, all of the artwork in the background had to be suggestive of Olympics in Sydney, but it was like the lawyer's nightmare from hell.
So this is an indicative of one of those elements whereby we couldn't have the Olympic rings, but we could use the colours into Olympic little dishes. And so I don't know who did this, but it was a beautiful art department piece where we had the 5 elements of colours in clocks on the wall, which I have one.
Only one. I think you've done incredibly well. I think Wayne's stash of memorabilia is awesome.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's the 5-finger discount at the end of the series. It was.
I remember the if you look at carefully, on the computer monitors, we had screensavers, so you just didn't have blank monitors. And a friend of mine designed it with the Olympic rings. But if the Olympic rings ever actually formed the logo, we couldn't do that. So if you watch it, they get very close to almost touching and forming the logo, and then they disappear. Indeed. It was a very fine line, wasn't it? Which we enjoyed pushing a little bit.
Oh, totally. We had to push it. Now, of course, it would be remiss if we didn't talk about the absolute comedic writing genius, both of John Clarke and Ross Stevenson. And I think one of the most sort of famous clips out of the games was the 100 metres track. So let's just have a look. It was hard to choose a bit of this, but choose a bit I have. So let's have a look at what I chose.
Mr. Wilson, it doesn't matter whether it's horizontal or vertical. 100 metres is 100 metres.
No 2 100 metres tracks are ever the same. Everybody knows that.
Well, how long is our 100 metres track?
Look, what's the point?
The point, Mr. Wilson, is that in 739 days, we're going to have the Olympic 100 metres final on that track. This is an event that'll be watched by about 600 million of the world's most dedicated rugged individualists. You and I both know it's going to be run on a track that's not 100 metres long.
How do you know that?
Mr. Wilson, do you know who is the current 100 metres all-comers Australian record holder?
No. Can I guess?
Oh, there's not much point in guessing, Mr. Wilson.
Is he an African-American?
He's not an African-American, no.
Is he that Canadian from Jamaica?
No, he's not a Canadian from Jamaica, no.
I give up.
The 100 metre record in this country, Mr. Wilson, is currently held by Brian.
Brian?
Yes, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And you, Mark, Mr. Wilson, set at a blistering session last Wednesday. I wish you'd been there. We were down there and we had a bet.
Is this wind assisted?
No, and we'd had a couple, and in my view, Brian's not in quite the nick he was at the same stage of last season.
So you've measured the track?
Yeah, we've measured the track, Mr. Wilson.
So you know how long the 100 metres track is?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
How long is it, Mr. Wilson?
You know how long it is?
I want to hear you say it.
94 metres.
94 metres. 94 metres.
Oh.
It's extraordinary piece. It's timeless, that little piece. I love the way that they lean in as they get closer to the admission that it's not 100 minutes, John just leans in closer and closer to the screen until he finally gets him to say it. It's brilliant. It's a lovely piece.
But I think it was shot very simply. I mean, it's just a beautiful script and a beautiful performance. You know, yeah. I think we had to do much.
Nothing.
Well, I think we're just about out of time, but I'm going to ask you, what was the game? What did the games mean to you in terms of a place to work in your career? And I mean, for me, it was just like, holy hell, how did we manage to do that? We were doco people. And it stays with me as a result of that. But how did you guys feel about it?
Well, very similar. I mean, I'd never done anything and haven't since really worked in that. I mean, I'd love to go back into that drama field or anything like that. So I'm gone back to doing factual and documentaries, which is, love doing. So to have that opportunity, but to have such an opportunity to work with the best, the best crew, the best team, the best, performers and writers, you can't do better than that. And have so much mischief on set, a lot of fun and, great times to have. So, yeah, best thing I've ever worked on, by far.
It's absolutely the best thing I've ever worked on, really, and just for all the reasons Bruce said. And I think just on a more serious note, I'd come also out of a current affairs background as well as documentary. So I'd worked on news, I'd worked for a couple of years on Four Corners. So the liberation of working on the games where you could actually say quite extraordinary things. You could pretend you were interviewing John Howard, the Prime Minister, that if we were doing that in Four Corners, we would be sued and it couldn't go to air. So I found that kind of fantastic that you could actually say all these mischievous but quite serious things. But because it was comedy and because of the genius of the writing of John and Ross, you could get away with it. And that added to the kind of the glory of it for me too.
Yeah, I agree with both those. It was, to me, it's just this unmatched collaboration that we had going throughout both series. In fact, it was just extraordinary. And to watch up close John's talent come forward. He's quite brilliant, and his delight at being on set and being mischievous, and equally in the edit, when he would come in, he'd be equally delighted and mischievous about things there too.
I think John had great respect for the audience as well and loved the audience. And I think out of that, the audience respected really, loved the series, and it grew. There's a lovely relationship between the two. And that doesn't often happen, to actually remind you that we're making this for an audience.
Well, on that note, I'm going to say thank you very much to you all. And I think I might just have to go and raise a glass to John Clarke when I've done this. I might get out a couple of tissues, actually, because I feel quite emotional having been able to talk about John and the games. So thank you to you all, to Bruce.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Jenni.
Thank you. It's been great.
And Wayne.
Oh, look, I could talk about it all day. It's fantastic. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. So that's it for us from Running Free for the moment. Thanks again also to ACMI and Beyond Productions and the ABC for making this one happen. See you next time.